Get those shades on, put on the sunblock, and kick back because summer's upon us, ladies and gents. Which also means my first year of community college has concluded. Fortunately, the year went a lot better for me than originally anticipated. I learned new things about the world and myself, and I overall feel smarter coming out of it. I decided to enroll in a film appreciation course this past semester to enlighten myself on some filming techniques I hadn't considered, and to be exposed to some movies I hadn't heard of before. It's basically a glorified film studies course if you've ever taken that in school. These were the expectations going into this class, but what I got from it all, well, let's talk about it. Throughout the spring semester, I watched a total of 9 movies for film appreciation. Comparing this to the film studies courses I took throughout high school, I was probably watching around double the amount of movies. With that said, these 9 films are some of the most bewildering selections of movies I have ever seen recommended for a class. Each film was tied to a certain film element that we would then have to write about how well it performed said film element. So, I present to you the 9 films in chronological order: Julie and Julia, Moonlight, The Midnight Sky, Hail Caesar, Black and White, Pan's Labyrinth, Burden of Dreams, The Guardian Brothers, and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Maybe you've heard a few of these flicks, maybe you haven't heard of any of them. In any case, I intend to briefly review each film and end the video with my ranking of the 9 required screenings. For anyone watching this video that intends to take film studies or film appreciation courses in high school or college this fall, this video is for you. Of course, my personal experience with the class isn't representative of all film studies courses across the country, but hopefully I can give some insight on to what it may look like and what you're signing up for. Without further ado,
let's just jump into it.
Never put the deep fryer so close.
Julie and Julia is fine. It's a perfectly average and little wholesome flick. This is the kind of film your wine mom, aunts, and their gal pals would love to go see in a theater. It centers around the life and career of Julia Childs, the world-famous chef who popularized French cooking to the US, while also putting a spotlight on a New Yorker named Julie Powell, who attempts to complete all of Julia's 524 recipes in a year. Like I said before, this film is just painfully average. Nothing really happens, the stakes are super low, everything is in frame, everyone is in focus, but there's really nothing here that is showcasing anything unique or uses the camera in a way that heightens the storytelling. The film element I had to focus on was mise en scène, and aside from a few of the costumes, the set design of the main locations, and a few scenes with key lighting, the use of mise en scène in this film is pretty lackluster. Having this be the first film we watched in the class, with the focus element being pretty subpar, definitely set the bar pretty low for the rest of the class.
I am not gay. I have relationships with women and sex with men.
And I got news for you. That means you're gay.
There's not much for me to say about Moonlight that hasn't already been said. It's good. It's really damn good. I've seen the film about 3 times now, and I still find subtle symbols and techniques used I hadn't noticed before. It's without a doubt some of Barry Jenkins's best work before he got pretty shallow in the Hollywood scene. But like, come on, this is the Best Picture winner of 2017. You've definitely heard of it, and you should definitely see it. The film element of focus here was the cinematography, and frankly, the camera work truly shines here. I wouldn't be surprised if other film classes used this movie to analyze certain shots or uses of framing and blocking. Having this be the second screening kind of threw me for a loop because I wasn't sure why my professor didn't just start with this film first to give all the students new to the world of cinema a picture that can make them feel excited for the future of the class. this movie is the most bruh of the bunch. What I mean by this is how the film tries to tell some very poignant themes and is wrapping a very interesting narrative, but the execution is slow, dragged, and just feels it isn't treading any new water that past sci-fis have done already. This is George Clooney's 7th time in the director's chair, and I feel like he needs some time to grow. He also stars in the film, and while he gives a pretty competent performance, actors like Kyle Chandler and Tiffany Boone were really just hamming it in for the paycheck. The film element I had to keep in mind while watching was the sound, but the sound mixing and editing isn't anything notable at all. Aside from the zero gravity space scene, the sound doesn't do anything that excels other films in the sci-fi genre. I mean, there's clear use of diegetic and non-diegetic sound in the movie, but you can find that almost anywhere. With films like these, I can't even be bothered to give a proper synopsis because I honestly don't feel like it's deserved, or I should even put time into that. There's plenty of better and more engaging sci-fis dealing with the same ideas and concepts that won't make you feel like you wasted 2 hours of your time.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
So I don't know if my professor has a George Clooney hard-on or what, but he decided to show us 2 films with him in top billing back to back. He also wouldn't shut the fuck up about him in the lectures, but that's not important. As any film buff, I've been very familiar with the Coen brothers' work. Hell, No Country for Old Men sits proudly in my top 10 favorite films of all time, but Hail Caesar just sort of skipped my radar when it was released. I guess at the time it just appeared to be another attempt of famous directors wanting to make their love letter to classic Hollywood, or the quote-unquote better days of showbiz. However, I was pleasantly surprised as to what the movie was actually about. Hail Caesar highlights the life of producer Eddie Mannix, played by Josh Brolin, who has to deal with the issues and problems arising at the esteemed Capitol Pictures. All seems routine until famous actor Bard Whitlock, played by George Clooney, gets kidnapped while on set. All in all, Hail Caesar is a very quaint film. It's well cast, has some great commentary on post-war Hollywood, includes hilarious satire, and features song and dance numbers that are extremely amusing. However, it was very hard for me to feel connected to the characters and the story as a whole. The film just wasn't giving me many reasons why it needed to be made, and what it was trying to do with the subject matter. But if you're looking for some great acting, memorable scenes, and hilarious line deliveries, this one's for you. The film element I had to write about was the editing, and I swear I don't see what my professor saw in this film editing-wise. This is one of the most cookie-cutter edited movies I've seen. The cuts, the transitions, all of it was just overall good. Again, it's not doing anything spectacular with its editing at all. Like, the Coen brothers edited this on Premiere Pro, the software I'm using right now. The film element I feel is more worthy has to be the acting or writing. The scene where the kidnappers are talking to George Clooney's character for the first time still cracks me up.
I'm gonna say the N-word.
That's racist! You can't say the N-word!
Black or White is one weird mess of a movie. In short, Kevin Costner's wife dies in a car crash, which leads him to start drinking again. He and his wife had been taking care of the child of their dead daughter, but now that the mother figure is gone, the father's side of the family wants custody of the kid. This boils into this racially tinged custody battle between Kevin Costner's and Octavia Spencer's characters. While the acting from both main stars is very good, the movie fails to provide timeless and prominent ideas. There are many scenes that go on too long or feel sluggish in pacing, and the acting from the supporting cast just flops in comparison. All of this combines into a weird mess that just creates an extremely unsatisfying watch. The film has a tough time keeping you entertained as well, and that's rich when you have goddamn Bill Burr in the cast. The most captivating part of the film was honestly Kevin Costner saying the hard R.
Make up with your daughter, you're just gonna walk? Is that what you do? What are you gonna sulk? You're gonna sulk all the way back to Compton? You're unbelievable, you know? You not only broke your little girl's heart, but you're killing your mother. You can't do any worse than that, Reggie. You know what, you need to quit acting like you're some kind of little street nigger. You're not.
The film element I had to note here was the acting. I can see why my professor would go this route, but holy shit, the acting of the child is so fucking bad. Her mother figure literally just died, and she acts like a deadpan robot for the entire runtime. I understand most children in times of grief can act emotionless because they can't quite grasp the reality of the situation. But even when she's having heated fights with Kevin Costner, she still keeps up the same attitude. I can't for the life of me understand why I have to write 700 words about how good the acting was when the film is giving me performances like this.
No one can spy on us in here. It's just you and me. No audio records of what we say. No video for lip reading analysis. Get closer.
One of Guillermo del Toro's most well-known works, Pan's Labyrinth, is set in 1944 Spain, where a group of fascist soldiers is deployed to wipe out rebels within a remote forest. One of the groups of soldiers is the evil sadist known as Captain Vidal, along with his new wife and stepdaughter Ophelia. As Ophelia begins to see the carnage and trail of blood her stepfather leaves behind, she begins to delve into the mystical world known as Pan's Labyrinth. This film is definitely up there as one of the best fantasy and best war films made in the 21st century so far. You've probably heard of it already, and I'd recommend it to anyone who wishes to give it a watch. The allegorical themes, aesthetics, tone, and mood give a very abstruse and wondrous approach to the film. The acting from the then 11-year-old Ivanka Baquero is stellar and much better when in comparison to the girl in black or white. Captain Vidal is a very serviceable antagonist, but at times can just seem a little too evil or unhinged that the subtlety kinda goes away. You may not notice it, but your brain will. I like to group The Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth, and Shape of Water as an unofficial trilogy, all dealing with authoritative and sadistic leaders, disobeying protagonists, and fantasy elements in a wartime setting. The film element of focus here was the film's genre, and this is a great pick for viewers wanting to see how a director or writer can play with interchanging genres, or how you can combine them. Genres are really just a label we put on art to categorize it better, so when directors try to erase those lines and make the genre much more gray, it can be a very special sight to behold.
And there was a noise, and it was a whiz, and you just said, "I've been shot." You had, look, you're bleeding.
I think here somewhere. Yeah.
Look, I mean, somebody shot at you and created a wound in your abdomen.
It's not significant.
Burden of Dreams follows the 5-year journey of director, writer, and producer Werner Herzog as he attempts to complete one of his hardest films to date, Fitzcarraldo. Due to the film's plot being triumphant against all the odds, Herzog was extremely stubborn and determined to do the film as practically as possible. This leads to an onslaught of issues such as filming on location with natural light, directing hundreds of indigenous Peruvians, conflicts with other factions and tribes, and moving a 320-ton ship over a mountain. The film element in question is not documentary like you may think, but producing. Werner Herzog had essentially full creative control over this project. The only people he really had to answer to were the investors that were financing this picture. So this meant he got to call all the shots on set as long as he knew he had the money to do so. Viewing this style of producing was fascinating yet a little underwhelming as an aspiring filmmaker. In modern cinema and movie production, a writer usually doesn't get lucky enough to direct their own script, and it's even more unlikely a director will get to produce their own film. Perhaps at this point in time, I had wished to see a documentary where a director is having to deal with the backlash from their producers and having to submit to the wishes of the writer at the same time, and how the stress, guilt, and integrity of the film affects them. This is a documentary you can't see on Netflix, but the entire film is on Vimeo to watch for free, and is on Criterion Collection if you choose to support it more financially. I'd recommend watching it in any way you can, because this documentary opened my eyes to the horrors of filmmaking. If you think your production is being faced with obstacles, and you begin to lose hope in finishing, just watch Herzog push himself to almost inhumane levels of directing for 95 minutes. Some of my most favorite parts of the movie, surprisingly, weren't the filmmaking scenes, but the moments with the indigenous tribes, getting to see their way of life, how more developed nations have affected them, and how their perspectives and background helped influence the final product of this film. If you loved Herzog in The Mandalorian, or just enjoy his past work, then this is just the film for you.
What are your plans when this movie's all over? What are you going to be doing?
I shouldn't make movies anymore. Should go to a lunatic asylum right away. But I don't know, it's very much of it is too crazy and too just not what a man should do in his life all the time. And I feel even if I get that boat over the mountain and somehow I finish that film, anyone can congratulate me and talk me into finding it marvelous. Nobody on this earth will convince me to be happy about all that. Not until the end of my days.
If this movie was a person, I'd put a knife to all their friends, family, and loved ones and gut them while the movie had to just sit and watch. After I'd brutally beat the film to death and squeezing the eyeballs in until the head explodes. The only con is I can only do it once. Okay. Might have gotten a little carried away there. But metaphorically murdering this piece of trash is without a doubt an act of mercy. This is quite possibly one of the worst animated films my eyes have had to look at. Of course, this will never be to the level of those foreign knockoff Disney/DreamWorks animations, but those aren't real films, at least not in my book. This can be considered an actual major motion picture, and that offends me to my core. The Guardian brothers have an actual cast lineup of A-list stars, deceivingly good animation on the surface, and is easily searchable on Netflix. The film was directed by Wang Wei, a Chinese entrepreneur who founded his own animation studio. So basically, there's more films like this. In short, it was a Chinese animated and voice-acted film that was localized with American actors, but none of that gives any excuse to the quality being worse off because of it. Edward Norton, Nicole Kidman, Mel Brooks, and Meryl Streep are all in this movie, yet in the interviews they all look like they just got woken up, drugged, and have no idea what they're doing.
I play Luli.
Maybe the spirits will help us. Rain wants to believe in the spirit world, and she's not gonna stop until she figures it out.
I play one of the two Guardian brothers, Yulei.
It's even more present in the film itself. Their deliveries are so fucking painful to watch. This is only an hour and 47 minutes, but it feels like hours. I'll be honest and tell you what, I tapped out in the climax. I literally couldn't finish this film. It would be a waste of time, a waste of brain power, and a waste to you viewers if I even tried to explain the synopsis of this film. Everything about this is bad. The acting, the pacing, the structure, the characters, the animation, the music. I can't for the life of me find a silver lining here. But the biggest insult is what you're all probably expecting. Why did my professor believe this film is worth studying and researching for? I had to focus on the screenwriting of this film. Yeah, not the animation, not the acting, not the music, but the writing. The Social Network, Marriage Story, The Irishman, Eternal Sunshine. There are countless films on Netflix right now that are current and have immaculate levels of screenwriting. My professor must have just seen the 3-act structure, which was so on the nose, and said, "Yeah, I can't understand anything that's going on. Let me have my students watch this." The writing in this film is certainly the worst part of the animation as a whole. It is an insult to screenwriters everywhere that you would write dialogue this poorly. Characters just exclaim exposition and vocalize their flaws instead of showing them. The structure of the script is so mishandled, having sequences that seem important feeling rushed. But wait, we need another dance number, baby! Yeah, celebration, you fucking troglodytes!
"18 naked cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch. Big herd throbbing cocks wanting to be sucked."
The final film I had to watch was The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. This is yet again directed by the Coen brothers. The anthology consists of 6 separate western shorts that take place in the Old West, each dealing with the sinister and grim natures of the New World. Much in Coen brothers' fashion, the film tackles the idea of death and how much meaning it may or may not have to the victim or the parties involved. The film begins very lighthearted and extremely cartoonish. However, the shorts get darker and deal with the terrifying reality that is death. The final film element left to analyze, if you couldn't guess already, was directing. So it made sense as to why we watched 2 films by the Coens this semester. Comparing what they did with Hail Caesar and what they did in Buster Scruggs was enlightening to see. I was pleasantly surprised my professor ended the screenings with such a delightful piece of directing. The Coens have always been a pair of auteurs that always seems to be reactionary to the general consensus viewers get from their films. This anthology feels like they're responding to all those critics and fans that say they're just nihilist filmmakers who make films telling the audience that nothing matters and your life is worthless. However, throughout their filmography, the films always seem to have an extremely optimistic final message that most likely stays hidden among all the violence and death. The optimistic message I see in this is the stories being told. The entire film is transitioned through a storybook. Each story of the anthology is just a different chapter. Although most of the characters we follow throughout the movie die or experience death, it's about the stories they leave behind. The people who will tell their stories and continue their legend. The film has a lot more to say, of course, however, I found this part of the deeper meaning to be very insightful. I'd recommend this film to anyone who enjoys a good western or has seen any prior Coen brothers films. Alright, so now that I have all the reviews out of the way, I can finally end this video by ranking each one from worst to best. If you wished I talked more about one of the films listed, then... okay. So the worst is obviously Guardian Brothers, there's no surprise here, and it's a film I wish no one has the displeasure of seeing. Next up is The Midnight Sky. Not as bad as Guardian Brothers, but extremely incompetent and just feels like work getting through it. After that, we have Black or White. A few performances here shine out, which brings it a step over Midnight Sky, but it's not enough for me to recommend anyone watch it. I put Julie and Julia above Black or White because this is definitely the most harmless and fine film of the bunch. Would I recommend it? Not particularly. However, if you catch your mother watching it and want to spend some quality time with her, then this isn't a bad viewing. Hail Caesar comes next because this is where the films start actually being good. I'd recommend all the films starting now, basically. And again, it's a really good watch, it just didn't make me feel something the way the other films did. Ballad of Buster Scruggs follows right after, and while I feel like the meaning of the film is extremely sharp, when I compare it to the other works by the Coens, it lacks in many areas for me. Above that, I put Burden of Dreams, which was an eye-opening and transformative experience from a filmmaker's perspective, yet the only thing that puts it down a peg is perhaps my subjective expectations of the film, which is solely on me. In second place, I have Pan's Labyrinth, but with how well known the film is, that shouldn't be surprising. And finally, Moonlight is the top film here. It showcases the film element in question perfectly, and it's just an overall extremely solid film. The top 5 films on this ranking are probably the most well-known films on this list, but they're all good films, and good films will always receive the notoriety they deserve one way or another. If I were to leave a future film studies student with any advice, it's to go in with an open mind and have faith in your artistic integrity. You might see a film or a seminar that's awful or doesn't portray good filmmaking in your eyes, but then analyze why it doesn't work for you. What you see as a lackluster movie might be a keynote piece of cinema to the next. If we don't have these discussions and agree to disagree, then the critical approach to filmmaking will be dead in the water. In any case, that's all I got for this video. Thanks for sticking around and hope y'all have a good fall semester.